Yeah, the self-advocacy piece is huge.
Okay, we are live, but I'm going to pause for a minute. So we'll start right at 2 or 5.
Yeah. 2 in California. It's fine.
All right. Welcome to this session of AAC in the Cloud. We have Carolyn O'Hearn and Sara Pericolosi. I hope I said that right. We are so pleased to have you from Michigan and working in the educational system in Michigan. We're going to hear about making the world a bigger place for AAC users. And we're so excited about your presentation. So Carolyn and Sara, it's all yours.
Great, thank you. All right, so I'm sharing my screen now. Hopefully that all worked. We're going to hope that technology works for us. We're the last time slot of AAC in the Cloud for this year, and we're very excited to be here. So yes, you are here with Making the World a Bigger Place for AAC Users. I'm Carolyn O'Hearn, and my very talented colleague is Sara Pericolosi. We do have open captions running right now on the screen. Hopefully you guys can see them. It is my also visual cue to not speak as quickly as I usually do, so that you guys can capture what I end up saying through all of this. Our slides are posted on the website, on the AAC in the Cloud website, AAC conference, but I'm also throwing them into the Slack right now as we get started. So we, Sara and I both work for AAC-Shift, which is an IDEA grant-funded initiative through the Michigan Department of Education Office of Special Education. We are both AT-AAC specialists with speech-language pathology backgrounds, and we'll go into a little bit about who we are in just a quick second. But we are really excited to be here. But really with AAC-Shift, we collaborate with educators and families to improve educational outcomes for every learner by rethinking what is possible. So we partner with ISDs, which are our county or bi-county or groups of county run school systems here in Michigan in the areas of assistive technology, including AAC and literacy, as well as in math. And we provide resources for creating accessible digital materials. So the information from today's session is coming from our newest partnership opportunity called Building Blocks to Autonomous Communication, which really focuses on the fundamental skills needed to support AAC users through their language development journey. If you guys ever have any questions or want to brainstorm or be thought partners or pick our brains on anything, please feel free to reach out. Our emails are listed here on the screen, and they'll also be available on our final slide as well. As I said earlier, I'm Carolyn O'Hearn. We're both from Michigan. I live down in the Lower Peninsula. I'm about 45 minutes north of Detroit. And my colleague, if she's unmuted, that's good. So Sara, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. My name is Sara Pericolosi. I, too, am from Michigan, but if you hear it, I am from the Upper Peninsula. So I live in Iron Mountain, Michigan. I do not hail from Canada, but I definitely have that accent for sure. You might hear me say a or yeah, so I apologize, but we're really excited to be with you guys tonight or this afternoon, wherever you are.
Yeah, and it's 5 o'clock my time, 4 o'clock Sara's, and then 2 if you're joining us from the West Coast. It's all sorts of fun. As far as financial disclosures, Sara and I do receive annual salaries from AAC-Shift, and then we're both ASHA members, we're AAC enthusiasts, and so we're going to try to stay off of our soapboxes tonight, but we get on them pretty quickly when it comes to individuals who use AAC. So we're really excited about joining you guys tonight and having us think about communities and moving beyond the school building. So here are our learner outcomes. We're going to describe strategies to support communication within the home environment, how to support communication throughout community environments, and then hopefully you guys will be able to develop a plan to educate community members on how to support AAC users. If you are like I was several years ago, still working in my center-based program as the speech path, thinking beyond our school and beyond the educators. We would include families, but thinking beyond that really wasn't something that we talked about very often. So I'm really excited that we are starting to shift AAC practices to include families and the community. And so we are developing this outcome, this strategy that we're sharing today, to really start having you guys think a little bit differently in your approach. So I get all the first slides. I forgot how many slides I have first before Sarah. But through our work with ALT-Shift, like I said, we partner with ISDs and educators. So we really do some really deep dives with implementation work instead of going around and providing statewide trainings. We used to do that with ALT-Shift. Now we've been really focusing on providing some really great training and PD for staff in certain areas in certain districts, but really focusing on the application of that content after the PD actually happens. So we meet every 30 to 45 days with an implementation team. We brainstorm solutions to barriers that are happening. And what we were finding initially, as we used to provide these statewide trainings, or we weren't going as deep with some sites, that we would go to present some PD and find that a site had different splinter skills than other sites, or even splinter skills within the site we were with. So we came expecting that there'd be an understanding of fundamental knowledge about complex communicators or AAC use or just AAC in general. And we were finding that that absolutely was not the case and still isn't the case largely through no fault of the educators. We just didn't have a really systematic way of approaching it before. So Sarah and I, over the past couple of years, have really been focusing on how do we organize this to make sure that whoever we partner with, whoever we're helping with implementation, we really can make sure that all of the educators, all of the people on that team have the same information as we move through this content. So we will briefly go through that, but that's the building blocks to autonomous communication module, the platform. And so we developed 7 blocks to building blocks to autonomous communication. We will go through really quickly the first 6, and making the world a bigger place is 7. That's kind of where we send our teams off and say, okay, now you have this fun, like foundational knowledge, go run with it, do something with it, go tell other people about this, because you can't just keep it in-house. So if you're interested in learning more about the 7 blocks, Sarah and I are actually developing 11 on-demand modules right now that are hopefully, our targeted time for release is September of 2022. So only a couple months from now. We are frantically editing videos. We've been interviewing AAC users and parents of AAC users and educators, just to get a variety of perspectives instead of just seeing our faces talking about what we could be doing differently. And we really wanted to put more of the face, the why behind the work versus just being told to do it. So if you are Twitter users, that's probably where we will share the most up-to-date information about that. I am at Carolyn O'Hearn 13, and Sarah is at Pericolosi Sarah, and those will also be on our final slide as well. But we will be shouting from the rooftops when those are finished. So if you guys want up-to-date information on where to find them and if they've been released, that is probably the best way to figure it out.
All right. So like Carolyn said, we really developed these building blocks as a way to combat some of those splinter skills that we saw missing. So in our first piece, we really take time to have conversations with educators. We really challenge them to shift that mindset by really considering what is that least dangerous assumption. So we take time to have conversations about how my expectations for my students automatically impact the opportunities that I provide them. And in turn, those opportunities and their learning impacts, again, my perception. So it's just this vicious wheel of perceptions drives opportunities and expectations. We really sit back and challenge people to understand that when we talk about all students, we mean all students. So we hear a lot of times, yeah, but you don't mean this group. No, we mean everyone. So we take time to really start thinking about who are the most complex students on your caseload. Who are the most challenging students in your classroom, because we mean each and every person. We dive into the Communication Bill of Rights and give teams an opportunity to sit down and have these conversations, to talk about how they talk about students. How do they interact with students? How do they encourage families? And what do they really believe? And then we hit home at this point of autonomous communication, the ability to say what I want to say, when I want to say it, how I want to say it to whoever, wherever, whenever or not. We really take time to talk about communication is not compliance, and that our students have an opportunity to say thanks, but no thanks. Just like you guys right now, Carolyn and I don't think she mentioned this, if she did, I apologize, but we love interacting. So feel free to drop things in the Slack. We are both monitoring that. We really love that opportunity to have questions, to have that conversation, to push back. And that's what we provide for our site. So these 7 modules, chances are you guys have heard all of this information. But what we found in our implementation work is that if we don't take time to slow down in the beginning, if we don't take time to have these conversations and really challenge people to wrestle with this, to think about how this information applies to all students, it ends up creating barriers in the future. So these are really the foundational pieces. What you're going to see in these next 6 slides is kind of our non-negotiables or our key takeaways. So this is that first block, so understanding the fundamentals of AAC.
Perfect. So then as we go into the second block, we really dive into what is assistive technology in general. A lot of educators, a lot of family members, a lot of students don't recognize or realize that AAC is assistive technology. And there seems to be this weird air of mystique surrounding assistive technology. So we're trying to demystify that. We're trying to come in to say, you guys are already implementing a lot of tools that are AT. If your students need them, it's AT. If they need them to be independent or more successful or access the curriculum, to interact with others, it is their AT. And so what we want to make sure is, when we're talking about assistive technology, is that they're recognizing that everyone coming to the professional development, everyone coming to the training, everyone involved with these students is part of this assistive technology team. And I realized our captions are saying AT, like a cup of tea, and that's not what we want. So assistive technology team. So that first one is the expertise. We're not looking for all of our districts to go out and hire AT specialists. It's great when they have them, but we really want to make sure that they're being used to help build the community, to build the team, to provide some training, to make sure that the systems are shared equally throughout the district, and that we want the expertise here. All of the teachers, all of the family members, the student, the speech path, the OT, the PT, the social worker, the psychologist, everyone coming to that table is bringing their own experiences, their own background knowledge, and their own, level of knowledge about the student as well. And so we want to make sure that all hats come off the table as far as I'm the speech path, so I know best. In reality, that's not the case. I need to connect and collaborate with the OT. I need to collaborate with the PT in order for the student as a whole to get the services that they need and to be successful. So we're not looking for experts. We don't want to create many experts. We're creating and really just utilizing the expertise that's available. The next one is developing a team. And so we, like I said earlier, we work at the ISD level, so that county level. We really want to make sure that there is an assistive technology team that's available that brings a variety of stakeholders and perspectives to that team. So it's not just one speech path and one occupational therapist driving that. And we want to make sure that this team will brainstorm how to solve tricky students or provide professional development. We've got some really amazing teams here in Michigan who are being really creative with how they're supporting their educators and providing PD this year. And I could go on for a whole hour just talking about that. But also the team needs to be able to share or develop resources if they don't already exist. We do want to make sure that the administrator is part of this team and that they see that they have a valuable role on part of this as well. when we do anything as a team and collaboratively, we need to remove those silos. So that's that third chunk in the middle. Not only is it working together, but it's sharing information across departments. And what we're finding is that if you are in the same building, a lot of times you share information, but even from class to class, there could be pieces that are missed. Things might not be shared. If I'm the speech path, I go into one room and I'll talk about this really amazing thing. I might forget to talk about it in another room. And that's not what we want to do. We want to make sure that everyone has access to the same information, but really even thinking system wide as far as the school system, that the general education staff has access to this knowledge, and that we're working with the administrators, we're working with the IT department to make sure that the tools that are being purchased and the softwares that are being supported are in the best interest of the students. We ultimately want to make sure that there's a process so that everyone is doing something similar when it comes to tackling those tricky students and exploring and trialing and documenting AT. What does that look like? And that documenting piece is huge. We want to make sure that as students are moving from one classroom to the next, or one building to the next, or if they move out of the building or out of the district, that whatever tools that they need, follow them. So we spend a good chunk of our time when we're working with staff talking about assistive technology and what systems and processes they already have in place. And unfortunately, we find out that sometimes they don't exist. So we work on that too.
All right, so in this third block, we start weaving in what we're going to end up talking about here today, this idea of building inclusive environments for AAC users. But what we really start with is who are communication partners. And a lot of times it's a great conversation because we forget people, right? So we really pull in the idea of families, that we need to do a lot of partnering with families and educating families. We've heard a lot here at AAC in the Cloud, how we can really engage families and make sure that they are part of this conversation and that we're providing training to them as well. We really look at what are the communication partner skills and how do we fill up our own toolboxes? How do we build the confidence, the knowledge, the skills of those individuals who are supporting AAC users so that they feel more confident in modeling and demonstrating? We talk about how this idea of becoming a functional fluent AAC user is not going to happen the second that you provide a device for a student, but that it takes time. And it's more like building a house than it is like unlocking a door. So having the patience to really understand and to model. Just like we do for our typically developing children, we talk to them, and we don't expect them to talk back on day one when they are newborn babies. We talk a lot about modeling and how we demonstrate modeling. We pull in this idea of the importance of moving away from hand over hand. Again, we tie in that communication is not compliance. And so really looking at how can we engage students? How can we motivate them to want to communicate with us? And sometimes that requires us being more vulnerable, being silly, really getting down on their level and talking about what they want to talk about. But again, guys, it comes back to this conversation piece. It's not the content, it's having the conversation. It's talking about these things and taking an opportunity to challenge our own thinking. We talk about how do we engineer the environment? What does that look like? How do we follow the student's lead? And again, it's really this idea of developing my own skills, my own confidence, my knowledge, so that I can better support our AAC users, but also the people on our team, which again, we pull in this idea of we're building inclusive environments, which goes beyond the walls of our schools. So we start this conversation here, because if we aren't thinking about inclusive practices in our schools, it's going to be even more challenging if we start thinking about inclusive AAC beyond the school, if it's not already occurring within the school walls.
Oh, love that. So what you'll probably notice by this point, so we're on block 4 right now of the 7, and this is the first time that we really talk about tools. A lot of times when we're asked to do statewide trainings or district trainings, it's can you come do a pod training? Can you come teach us this about this tool? And it's not necessarily the tool that matters as much as how we are supporting the development of language. So we make sure that all of our sites that we're working with have these really fundamental skills and knowledge before we even say, now let's talk about the tools. But we do make sure that it is included because that is something that people are always wanting. Because there are so many AAC tools available, really this block focuses on exploring the tools that are already being used within the team's building or program. So if you did something and replicated this for your own teams, bring in all of the tools that you guys are using already, or have people who are attending bring their own tools, bring an example of AAC and how they use that for communication. Like Sarah said on the last slide, the conversations are really what are most important, not the content. So we could go off on 8 different tangents of the different tools that we have used in the building and really go back to, how does this align to the Communication Bill of Rights? How does this align to robust language and having our students become autonomous communicators? If it's one single message output, like a Big Mac switch, one switch that we are re-recording every day or multiple times a day, that's not going to help our students become more autonomous. It might be a step, but we need to start thinking about how we can have our students be multimodal, just like you or I are multimodal as well. So we explore the tools that are already available. We might provide additional information if the staff, if the speech paths aren't comfortable or well-versed in AAC, we might bring in other opportunities for them to explore and educators to explore. So we want the teams to know a little bit more of what's out there instead of just only selecting and using what they know about. So this is a really great opportunity to collaborate with the speech language pathologists and the OTs and the PTs and see what they know, as well as the teachers and the paras. What are you guys already using? And try to create that language rich environment so students have access to robust communication all day. And since we've already covered developing the process and feature matching, which is part of that process, really we focus on what the tools are, not how to select the right ones. It's really just letting the staff have time to explore the different tools, as we don't often have time. I remember taking pod books to the local restaurant and trying to order with it, or I would take my iPad, my speech iPad home just to learn on my own time, because in school, as I'm sure many of you know, we don't have a lot of time, a lot of extra time to be doing that. So this actually gives them time to get dirty with the tools and figuring out how to program it and think about what students don't have access to a device yet, and we might want to trial device as well. So Margie, we will talk a little bit. You're on the right page with where we are. We will talk about how to talk more about activities in the home. That is something that we will be talking about within this presentation. And I think what it goes back to, as far as someone not liking to use their device in public, it's all autonomous communication again. As long as they have a way to indicate and say what they want, when they want, to whom they want, it doesn't only have to be a device. If a student is more comfortable answering yes, no in certain scenarios, if they're not as familiar or comfortable where they are, the same way that there are times that I don't feel like talking either, right? I'm an extroverted introvert. So I like being out, but there are times where I like being out in controlled environments. And if I don't know who I'm with or what we're doing or what the plan is, I will kind of just close back in. So it's a lot of modeling. It goes back to what we talk about in block 3, is modeling that communication, what they could say if they wanted to say something, or I saw in one of our other, I think it was Kelly Fauner's presentation, talking about, it was Lauren Gonzalez and Aaron Polk's and Rachel Smollin's presentation, where they talked about, rather than just labeling and saying you are mad, it's, oh, I wonder if you're upset, or I wonder if you're thirsty. I wonder if you'd like to go in here, kind of opening up that opportunity to let them say, like, if you have something to say, great. If not, that's where I can fill it in and say, oh, you know what? I'm thirsty. So I'm going to go, let's go into the store and get a pop. And that's how you know I'm from Michigan, because it's pop and not soda. But yeah, it's a lot of modeling. And if the student or if the AAC user has another way to communicate that is autonomous for them, I say go with what that is. I'm sure that there are multiple other things. Go ahead.
I'm going to happen there too is having a conversation with them and asking why they don't feel comfortable in community environments. If you can have that level of conversation and just start kind of figuring out what's the why behind it. Maybe they have a very familiar place that they go often. Or maybe, I know I'm just reading Kelly's idea of looking for other AAC users. Is seeing, is there a way to build a community of AAC users in your school? And finding a place, let's just face it, there are some places that are naturally more inclusive and more to be there to support everyone accessing their business or coming to enjoy it. So are there environments that maybe are a great place to start where people feel comfortable, and then have an AAC little lunch chat or community coffee so that people can see that modeling? And it's that risk taking is what we want to do. And so the more that we can demonstrate that risk ourselves, the more that we can offer opportunities for AAC users to model that for each other, all the power to you. There's the I told you I was going to get it in there, and I heard it the second.
Yeah. And I know that there are some, for some reason that went out. I know that there are some places here in Michigan that are trying to do mentorships with an AAC user within their local district to be in person. But we've also connected with Lydia Dolly, who is an AAC user. And I know she Zoomed in with one of our school districts here in Michigan just to chat with the students of an SXI classroom. So there are a lot of different ways to approach it. And if you want to reach out to one of us, we can brainstorm a little bit more with you later too. All right. So after we talk about tools, we then really start thinking about what about our students with complex bodies. So back in 2019, one of the ISDs here in Michigan, along with AltShift, brought Claire Cotter and Gail Porter from the Cerebral Palsy Education Center in Australia to provide an intensive 5-day workshop entitled Teaching Movements for Communication. I think they were just outside of Chicago too. So if you ever get the opportunity, I don't think I can recommend Teaching Movements for Communication enough. Go. It's a lot of information. It's brilliant. And it just has you thinking differently about your students who may have complex bodies. And it's something that, as speech language pathologists, we don't often get a ton of information in grad school about AAC, even though we are supposed to be these experts. We're supposed to have all this knowledge about it. But it's a really great way to bring that team together, the OTs, the PTs, the speech paths, thinking about how you can talk to your students about getting those movements going. And so really it was an opportunity to explore movement differences associated with cerebral palsy and other significant neurological movement impairments like Rett syndrome and Prader-Willi syndrome, as well as severe sensory processing challenges. And again, this was just it was life-changing because it just introduced concepts like the ones that are up on the screen, like motor planning and gravity and disassociation and weight shift, things that I, as a speech path, may not be readily thinking about prior to this, but maybe the physical therapist is thinking about weight shift or balance. Maybe the OT is already thinking about stability. So really it's bringing a lot of that information back to us. And so this section of building blocks, this block, we really dive deeper with our SXI classrooms, our severe multiply impaired classrooms, versus, just our CI classrooms that may not have students with complex bodies. But we talk about how communication and development and assessment and intelligibility can be affected by all of these movement issues. As well as explore how educators and families can support these AAC users who require an alternative method of accessing their robust communication system. So this is the block that will go into detail about eye gaze and partner-assisted visual scanning, partner-assisted auditory scanning, and partner-assisted auditory plus visual scanning, and when a student might be a good candidate for any one of those and how to trial that. There are some really great self-directed courses around cerebral palsy on the CPEC website. I'll throw that in the Slack, but it's the link down at the bottom of the slide as well. And yeah, Melanie in the Slack said that the teaching movements for communication sounds great. It is. It's amazing. Gail and Claire come to the US in our summers. And so I believe they only do one advanced pod and one teaching movements for communication. So I think that they're done for this summer. But if you have a chance to go to Australia, I think they're doing it in January, or just keep a lookout for next summer as well. We will be putting some of this information in our modules that we're recording, but clearly citing everything back to Gail and Claire, since they helped develop all of this, and the team at CPEC. But all right, so now we're going to talk about literacy, which is block 6.
Right. This is block 6. So guys, we're getting to 7, but before we hit 6, we pull back in that idea of autonomous communication, to be able to say what I want to say, when I want to say it, however, to whoever, wherever, whenever, or not. And we pull in this idea is that if I'm an AAC user, the only true path to autonomy is to be able to spell letter by letter. Carolyn mentioned that we just talked to Lydia, and she brought this point too about how sometimes it's very frustrating as an AAC user to want to use a specific word, and that symbol isn't in the device. And so that literacy really provides that ability for all users. So in this block, we have some sites that just look at an overview. So we talk about the work of David Copenhaver and Karen Erickson. We consider these 4 questions to understand the difference, am I teaching an emergent or a conventional learner? And then we provide a very brief overview of each of the emergent and conventional strategies and share the resources like Project Core, Tar Heel Shared Reader. We look at the DLMPD website. And for some of our sites, this is where they say, pause, let's hit the brakes. And we really want to dive deeper, and we either want a full emergent and or conventional literacy training. Again, in this, we really hit home, you guys, that why, because the work that we do is so incredibly challenging. And for me, when I keep thinking about the why are we talking about literacy for students, it really helps people commit to that beyond the training. Again, you guys keep hearing us say it's not the content, it's the conversation, because for a lot of us, it's a shift of mindset. And so in this block, again, we really take time to dive deep into what are my expectations and how does that impact the students that I work with each and every day. Again, we hit home, this is a team, right? It takes a village. And so we really pull in, how does the OT support literacy and what does that look like? How can the PT be a part of that? Let's talk to the VI consultants. And so we really take time to start thinking about literacy. And again, guys, this is where that, no yeah buts really hits home, because this is where we get a lot of, yeah, but you don't mean. Yes, 1000%. All means all. This is it, and this is where we're going. So again, this is block 6, and now this is where we dive into block 7, which is really what does this look like beyond the classroom?
Yep. So before we jump in, just for time's sake, we're going to kind of gloss over the next couple, but just think about what content areas might be missing in your program, what splinter skills you might be seeing. When we developed building blocks, this was not something that it's earth-shattering information. It's all information that's readily available, but we just had a way to organize it. And so if you're looking for a way to organize it, by all means, take our organization. But we put a lot of love into what we're doing. So think about what blocks might be missing and what conversations you might need to have, what people on your team you might need to have, and think about just moving forward, what that could look like. So, okay, we've built these foundational skills. We're shifting our focus and our thinking to environments beyond the classroom. Obviously, the pandemic and subsequent school closures highlighted the importance of building inclusive environments, not only within the schools, but in our communities as well. And so now for the remainder of our session, we're going to talk about how we can help make that shift happen and what that looks like. And so let's dive into some of these strategies. But what we're hoping to is that this will help, again, with the conversations, help you start thinking what conversations you might need to be having with administrators, with other staff members, with other families, and how to support our AAC users beyond the brick and mortar classrooms. Something that we have in Michigan that I'm really thankful for is something called Michigan Alliance for Families. And we've been partnering with that organization. It's another grant through MDE. And we've been really starting to get the word out about assistive technology, because we've also found that some parents just don't know what they don't know. And so we're trying to bring some awareness to AT and AAC and starting to ask questions and form some communities to help support each other as they're going through this journey as well. Sarah, I'm looking at you. Do we want to do the Mentimeter or do we want to keep going?
I threw it in the chat. If, as we're talking, you guys want to throw in barriers, Carolyn and I have started a collection of what are the barriers that we see. So feel free. Carolyn has it up. I have it up. So if there's any that we notice that we want to pause and talk about, or if you guys want to throw it in the Slack, feel free. But one of the things, like Carolyn mentioned, is we talk about barriers with sites, because if we don't talk about it, it's really hard to overcome them. And so if you are going to take any of this information and take this somewhere else, we would encourage you guys to include this section in it, is to have conversations about what they are. Because honestly, that's where we started to realize that we need to talk about building inclusive skills or schools in Block 3, is because this conversation came up as a potential barrier, is that if we're not doing inclusion in schools, how do we take that beyond the classroom?
Exactly. And Mentimeter is just a really nice way, if you do present to others and with others, that you throw it up on a slide and people use the QR code that we did, or they can type in Mentimeter. So it's just another tool that if you're not already using it, it's free. It's something that's really nice to just be able to use. Right. So lack of support from staff. I don't know who put that in there, but it's anonymous, which is really great, because that's another big piece of it is sometimes staff have their own opinions about what these barriers are, or have some really great ideas, but they don't feel supported enough to be able to say them out loud. So by putting them up in writing, then you can really have some conversations of, okay, look, we need to talk to this. We need to talk to the staff. We need to figure out how to get access for complex body. We need to figure out how to connect with other people using AAC. So we will come back to this, because we also will use it for resources that we're sharing outside of the classroom as well. You guys keep adding to it though.
All right, so I'm not going to hit this home again, because I feel like I've already said it twice to you guys, but it's really this idea of challenging autonomous communication is more than answering yes/no questions. It's more than making a choice based on what Carolyn thinks I might want to do today. Autonomous communication really starts with the individual speaker's thoughts and with no one else. So we really make sure that we're all understanding and all believe the same things as we move forward, because our goal is autonomous communication outside of the classroom, beyond the classroom. And what does that look like?
Yep. And we've added the or not piece, which I know we touched on really briefly. Gail's not out there saying or not. That's us adding the or not piece. Because once again, we ask for participation in a Mentimeter or in a chat or just in a room. And we have the choice not to say something. And so do our complex communicators as well. So because autonomous communication is the goal and it needs to be inclusive in all environments, we need to think, how do we actually achieve that? So if the AAC user is autonomous in the classroom, but doesn't have a way to communicate on their 40-minute bus ride home, or if they only have access to their robust system while they're working with the SLP or for choice time, that's not autonomous communication. That's not having access to being autonomous. So this staircase graphic actually comes from the work with Karen Erickson and Dave Copenhaver. And when the student is at the bottom of the staircase, we provide the supports to help move them up one step at a time in order to help get them to the top or that goal, the autonomous communication piece. So I know sometimes it feels daunting when we think, okay, we need our students to be autonomous communicators in school. And now we have to think outside, and now we have to think the community. And there are just so many people in the community. How do we get there? One step at a time. We put one foot in front of the other. We work our way up the staircase. You can't tackle everything all at once. So instead of being super overwhelmed, let's really go step by step here. And so here we're going to go through a couple different techniques and ideas of how to build the communication toolbox in others. So in Block 3, we really talk about developing the skills of communication partners in school. Now we're thinking about what that looks like beyond. And so we'll share a few resources. We'll have opportunities for you to share a few resources. I love that the Slack was booming just a second ago. So I think that's a really great place to put it, or we'll update the Mentimeter as well. So when we are presenting on this information, we really dive deep into s'mores. And I know Dr. Jill Center and Matthew Bod were presenting yesterday. So I don't know if they're here today, but they have done some really great research around coaching with AAC use, with parents and with educators. And so we lovingly and enthusiastically share their s'mores acrostic to help remind educators and really help remind parents that there are a lot of different things that you can be doing, and you don't have to remember or do every single thing all at once. So if you haven't heard of s'mores before, that's it over on the left-hand side. And the link, I believe, takes you to the graphic itself. And so we'll share that graphic as well. There's also a really great podcast with Jill and Matt, who I think it was Talking with Tech with Chris Bugay and Rachel Madel, and they talk about teaching communication partners to model effectively. So there are some really great resources out there already, but we love s'mores and just the fact that it's reminding us to slow down. It's reminding us that we need to model, that we respect and reflect. So we respect how the student or the AAC user initially communicated, and then we will model a reply with our AAC or verbally. We'll repeat their frequently used utterances and then expand upon it. That's how we go up the staircase. If they're giving us 1 or 2 words, we're doing 2 or 3 words in response. We want to keep modeling a little bit more at a time rather than trying to model 8-word sentences all at once when we're getting familiar with it and the student's still getting familiar as well. And then that pause point of, let them respond, give them time to actually process what we're saying, as well as be able to participate as well.
All right. So one of the things that we talk about, again, we talked about this in Block 3, but now we talk about how can we take that prompt hierarchy and share it with other people. So for 12 years, I had the good fortune of being embedded in early intervention. And this is one of those things, one of those conversations that if you are an early interventionist or if you work with students, which I'm assuming all of you do, is having a conversation with families about what prompting looks like. Because families often, I do it with my own kids, right? I prompt out of love because it's hard to watch people struggle, especially those that I love most. And so we have a conversation about how sometimes waiting is the most important thing that we can do. And even if it makes you feel like it's helpless and that you're helpless and they're struggling, that's okay. But giving parents the permission to have this conversation, to talk about it, to ask questions, to model that risk taking is really important. So again, we hit home that piece that we are not using hand over hand, and that at each one of these levels, that idea of providing wait time, that expectant pause, is so important. And again, having these conversations and helping families build their communication toolbox as well.
So I shared the graphic in the Slack. This comes from Kate Ahern and Sheila Nelson or Nielsen. So again, we're trying to give credit where credit is due. We are not coming up with these amazing ideas. We're just trying to pull it all together so that it's in one spot and it goes in one area. If you have other resources that you share, also, look at all these good challenges. Limited awareness in AAC in the community, impatience. Well, that's a huge one. And people making time and wanting to learn it all in 45 minutes. Yeah. So how do we do that? How do we help make it asynchronous so that they can learn on their own? Which, hey, by the way, all of our modules will be about 45 minutes each. So if you want to send them that way, that would be great too. But if you guys have other resources that you share with parents or educators or community members, please feel free to share those over in the Mentimeter as well. We want to make sure that we're sharing some of these tools, or you can share them in the Slack as we go forward as well.
All right, guys, I feel like I'm the conversation lady that keeps saying, have the conversation, but it really is this idea of a conversation. It's sitting down with families and asking them, what is your bandwidth to take on more? Where are you at? What do you feel ready for? Carolyn mentioned that graphic of take it one step at a time. It's the same thing with families. So sit down and ask, is there a part of the day that feels more doable, where you don't feel like, oh my gosh, I am just drowning to get through this part of the day? For me, a part of the day that I would not target would be getting my kids out of the door in the morning, because I feel like I say the same things 85,000 times and I am just running. But bedtime is always kind of the end of the day where I get to breathe and just enjoy my kids for who they are. So giving parents permission to understand, we don't have to start everywhere at once. And what do you feel like you're ready for? Where can we start? And as long as we're taking and we're moving one step forward, we're showing growth. And that's what this is really about. It's just figuring out what their comfort level is, where they're at, what they're interested in, and then finding a way to meld that into our therapy sessions and really providing coaching to families.
And in the Slack channel, Saoirse has a really great point that says use AAC to talk to yourself. That's a brilliant skill that AAC users need to develop. And then we also, as communication partners, need to develop as well. So thank you for sharing that one as well. When we're thinking about easing into modeling, if we're thinking about the new parents to AAC users, the parents who are finally excited that we're willing to jump into it, sometimes it comes across as overwhelming. Like, okay, I have 4 kids and they're running around and now I have to model this instead of just talking to them. Modeling is awkward at first. It's still awkward sometimes if you're looking for a word and then you start just getting a little anxious about not finding it. So we often tell parents and community members just to select specific vocabulary that can be modeled throughout the day. That's one approach, or select a structured part of the day to specifically model AAC. So like Sarah said earlier, we probably won't pick the time that's the most stressful of leaving the house and trying to get everyone out the door in the morning. But are there other times in the day that would be easier to do that? So use core if you don't have anything, but use the robust system if you do have something. So that's the big piece. We had to say it. But here's one way to have conversations with families and even other educators. All of this can be adapted across the board. Is think about that activity. Let's say we're going to target open and not today. These are the words we're going to target. We like doing daily core words, not just 2 words for the week, because really we say hundreds of thousands, millions of words. So we want to make sure we're modeling a lot of different words to our AAC users. But if we're targeting open and not, how can I use that during breakfast? How can I use that during getting dressed, going to school, and just have a nice little easy way to get into it and start thinking a little bit differently about this. And then on the flip side, if you're selecting the activity, hey, we're going to go to the store. What does that look like? Okay, when we're prepping for the store, I'm going to ask them to help me make a shopping list. I can model help. I can model make. Mommy can make dinner. When we're at the store, here are some things that I could say. Here are the words I can target. It's just doing some pre-work that, again, if we aren't used to doing it, if the families aren't used to doing it, it's not going to come as naturally, and it could be overwhelming again. If I asked my husband to go out with an AAC device right now and only talk or model some things with our 2.5-year-old, he doesn't like grocery shopping in general. So this probably wouldn't be the ideal situation for him. But if we talked about it ahead of time and said, look, I really just want you to focus on these words, or here are some things you could say, it would help ease some of that anxiety and stress about it. But really, we want to be comfortable with modeling in the moment for sure.
All right. And so this next piece came up actually in the Mentimeter, this idea of awareness in the community. And so how do we build that awareness? And part of it is having a conversation, looking at your community again, and not saying we're going to do everything all at once, but picking some of these groups of people. So looking through the community and saying, where are the pockets of people that maybe are ready? Where are the people, where are the places in our community that we see a lot of AAC users accessing it? Do you guys go out and provide community support? Are there job sites that you guys go to often? Those would be great places to start these conversations. Somebody threw in that Slack modeling in the community so that other people have an opportunity to see you modeling and demonstrating AAC, and let them know, hey, if you have questions about this, ask. My own kids see it all the time, every day, and so they ask a lot of great questions. That's one of the things I love about kids, is they aren't nervous to ask the questions, they just come out and ask them. So giving people that opportunity. And so what we're going to dive into next is how do we raise that awareness in our communities? All right. So I said find those targeted groups of people. We've seen educators across the state target different varieties of people and provide training. Some of the things that we just talked about, this idea of how do you model, how do you demonstrate, what does that look like, what is AAC, is some of what's helpful. If we think about our first responders, a lot of times they're coming across individuals in a moment of need, in an emergency. So helping them understand how to communicate with people. My husband is a first responder, he's a police officer and a fireman. I've done a lot of training with him because he's had calls with individuals who use AAC. And so talking to him about how can you support that, how can you make sure they have access? Again, it starts with a conversation. Thinking about when you guys go to the doctor, I used to hate when my mom would come and talk for me. So really talking to medical providers about talking to the AAC user, not presenting those questions to the family member, the caregiver that's sitting there. And then again, thinking about where in the community do your students go and who can you have these conversations with, and just helping them understand how the students communicate, that it is part of them. And in these next few slides, you guys, we're going to give you some really practical tools for how you can have these conversations with people.
So in the Slack, I'm going to also share this article. A lot of what we're going to be talking about, it comes from Assistive Wear from 3 years ago. And it still hits home today. So knowing that we only have 11 minutes, we're going to go through these, but also feel free to read the article as well. It gives you 12 really great ways to include everyone as far as communicating in your community. So the first one is really just paying attention. We want to talk about whoever we're out there with, that if let's say I go to Starbucks or we're going to do a community-based instruction, I might go out and talk to the staff that's working there already to say, hey, we're bringing in some AAC users. Here are some things. If you have questions, I'm going to give you some pre-learning ahead of time. But good listening really helps remove a lot of barriers. So our AAC users, our complex communicators, are typically really strategic with their gestures and other cues to help express their message. And so really the big thing is watch other cues that the person is giving to help you understand them. And we will talk a little bit more. I was going to go on another tangent, but I know it's coming up as a different strategy. But if they use their communication tool or their system to say a message, listen carefully to the voice from their system.
All right, this next one is really just looking at the physical environment. Are there ways to remove barriers? Is the environment wheelchair accessible? Are there quiet places in the environment or places that I could go away? If I needed a little bit of a sensory break, I have a coffee shop here that I will not go to anymore because it is insanely loud. There is no quiet space. So having these conversations with business owners to help them also understand and see how they can make their environments more inclusive as well.
So as in the community, if they may not be around AAC users often, and we go in and do some pre-teaching of, hey, we're going to have an AAC user come in, they might get kind of excited the first couple of times. So we really just want them to know that they are just people. As one of the articles and the surveys study that came out yesterday that Assistive Wear helped put on, they were saying really they just want to be known as people, not AAC users, not individuals who use AAC, they're just people. So the technology might be novel and exciting initially, but it's simply just how they communicate. So we can research or we can ask them about it later, but have that initial conversation first. Just don't let your curiosity interfere with your ability to listen.
All right, this next.
Sorry,
I'm jumping ahead.
No, you're fine.
You go. No.
We have on our notes who says what. And so I was like, oh, next one will be Sarah. No, it's me again. And like I said earlier, the closed captioning or the open captioning helps me with my rate of speech. But just so we know that it can be a barrier to communication as well, not only for our AAC users, but also those who have some hearing disabilities as well, or hearing impairments. So we want to make sure that we're just removing that additional barrier by having a slower rate of speech, not slow to make them seem like, oh, they're not able to understand us, but just slow down. Don't be super lightning speed fast.
All right, so now it's my turn and I'm going to jump in. What I love is this topic came up in the Slack, you guys. You guys said, hey, we want to see more visual menus for people. We want to see things that are more accessible and in different languages. And that's part of having that conversation with business owners to say, hey, if I'm an AAC user, if I'm somebody that doesn't speak English, if I'm a Spanish speaker, how would I come into your restaurant and order? I don't know about you, but I love Starbucks because I can order my drink online and I don't even have to go in and have a conversation. So some of that is about having this conversation with business owners. The other flip side of this is talking with our students about how they can access things like menus ahead of time to order ahead of time as well. So we're seeing a lot of shifts towards this. We're seeing a lot of QR codes. I was just in Home Depot. They're using QR codes now too on a lot of their stuff. So being able to pull things up and access it visually, order it ahead of time. Using really plain language. Carolyn and I went to an establishment where neither one of us could read the menu. Guys, I just wanted to get up and walk out because it was so inaccessible. I couldn't figure out what was on a hamburger because of the images that were behind the menu. So helping people just think about this ahead of time.
Also, as being a good communication partner, we want to make sure that we're watching for signs of confusion and then clarifying or repeating if necessary. So again, this goes back to our complex communicators being really strategic with how they repair communication breakdowns. So if they look confused or frustrated, or they just shrug their shoulders, or they don't respond, one, give them wait time to process that, but also ask them, can I repeat that? Or do you need me to repeat that? Do I need to clarify something? Just to make sure that what they're hearing and understanding is what you said, and giving them that opportunity to say, I didn't get it.
And to build on that, we're also going to take them at their word. We're not going to challenge, did you really understand what I was saying? If they say they get it, if they're moving on with the conversation, we're going to keep moving on. Carolyn mentioned this before, but we aren't going to use baby talk. We aren't going to have that high-pitched voice. And some of this is also, again, having that conversation with people who are unfamiliar with being AAC. So these are just some tools and tricks that we can use as we talk to other people in the environment. Another thing that we want to focus on is helping people understand that they're speaking to the individual, not somebody that is with them. And again, we talked about this earlier, but if they have questions, if they're wondering, if they want to see something or explore the device, it's asking. It's just asking rather than presuming, rather than not asking and just walking away, but to really take the risk and to sit down. And some of that, I know that came up earlier too, is having that conversation with business owners, with community members to really talk about what is AAC and helping them take out some of that unknown so they feel more comfortable.
For time purposes, we're going to skip over our video, but I will share that in the Slack in just a minute. They're two AAC users and they talk about their experiences out in the community. It's another really great opportunity to learn from the AAC users themselves. I just don't want to cut them off halfway through. I want you guys to actually watch the whole video. So when we're thinking about what inclusive AAC environments could look like, these pictures came right from AAC, which is the International Society of AAC. And I was thankful enough to go to the last one in Toronto and had the opportunity to experience a town hall, which if you haven't been to a town hall with AAC before, if you are not an AAC user, you cannot participate. So me being a non-AAC user, I had to sit along the back wall. And it was just a really great opportunity, again, to kind of have things flipped for me to see what is most empowering for the AAC users instead of someone like me or Sarah getting up and saying, do all these things. It'd be even more powerful having an AAC user be like, do all these things. The other piece is that communication access symbol. Isaac and the team who was helping set it all up in Toronto went around to a variety of businesses, and the businesses that had these stickers in it essentially said, I know how to communicate with an AAC user. So it's these basic skills all over again of, not speaking for the person, speaking to the AAC user, not to the person that they're with. And I think that that's something that you could have as kind of bragging rights for the team, that if you're moving into the community members, that they can have these stickers saying, yes, I support AAC users. I can talk to the community as well. The next piece is buddy bags. So Branch ISD is one of our ISDs here in Michigan, and they have been connecting with their Chamber of Commerce, their Kiwanis, their Rotary, their local Lions clubs to raise money to have something called buddy bags. And these are bags that have core vocabulary boards, weighted blankets, fidget stuffed animals, noise canceling headphones, and a variety of other communication boards like the alphabet number boards, This Hurts, the body board over on the upper right-hand side, in every single emergency response vehicle. So every police car, every ambulance, every fire truck has these buddy bags in them, because you never know who is going to be the one responding to an emergency. And I love that these are they are getting the training, they're being available, and they're in every single car available. So the fundraising is there. You just have to find your local group to get a little bit more. Another one of our ISDs, Copper Country, which is way up in the UP, is also doing something very similar, where they have a simple I need, the alphabet, medical conditions, just in case there is something that they need to know, and then the quick yes, no to be able to respond quickly in an emergency. I don't know if Sarah froze. Did Sarah freeze?
I can hear you, but I can't see you anymore. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah. So in our last minute, go for it.
You guys. So on this last slide, it's really, again, it's the conversation. It's sitting back and thinking about the attitudes and beliefs that we have.
Oh, you're muted now, Sarah.
There we go. It really impacts the expectations that we have, the opportunities that we provide, and ultimately their learning. If you guys have heard nothing else from us today, it's about start by having the conversation with people. Really sit down and spend time with people to challenge their thinking in a supportive way. But again, that starts with us too. So thinking about how can we take what we know, what we're passionate about, and where can we spread that into the community?
Absolutely. So think about what your next steps are, but really, if you guys ever want to contact us, chat with us a little bit more, there's our email and our Twitter. I think the biggest thing, and I just threw this in the Slack, is that oftentimes the people in the community don't know how to respond. They don't know, they're forming their own opinions. So the more we can educate and have these conversations, the better. My favorite phrase, which was adapted from Maya Angelou, is we did what we did when we knew what we knew. So now when we know better, we do better. And the same applies to community members as well. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. And we hope to connect with some of you guys in the future.
Thank you both, Carolyn and Sarah. What a great way to end a wonderful conference. You wrapped up so many resources and opportunities to support people in the community for their full lives. So thank you again for a great presentation.
Thank you.